In 1943, the United States was advancing across the Pacific, island hopping, seizing strategic positions, moving inexorably toward Japan. But they were not winning the ground war, not in any traditional sense. They were paying for every yard of coral and volcanic rock in blood. The Japanese soldier would not surrender. This wasn't propaganda. This wasn't exaggeration. It was tactical reality. The Japanese military had instilled in its troops a code that made surrender literally unthinkable, worse than death, a permanent shame to family and emperor. So Japanese soldiers fought to the last man, not as rhetoric, as fact. And they had perfected a defensive system that turned their willingness to die into a strategic weapon. They would hide in concrete pillboxes, in reinforced bunkers, in volcanic caves with interconnecting tunnels. Each position carefully sited with overlapping fields of fire. Each one a miniature fortress that had to be taken individually, at terrible cost. American rifles were useless against these fortifications. Artillery could pound them for hours with minimal effect. The Japanese would just shelter deep inside and emerge when the bombardment stopped. Hand grenades couldn't reach far enough into the tunnels. Conventional tactics were failing. This was not a war of movement. This was siege warfare on an industrial scale, a meat grinder. And in November 1943, at a tiny atoll called Tarawa, the United States Marine Corps learned just how bloody this new kind of warfare would be. Tarawa, specifically the island of Betio, a coral atoll in the Gilbert Islands, 2 miles long, 800 yards wide, flat as a panko board. It was defended by 5,000 Japanese troops, a mixture of special naval landing forces, elite Marines, and construction troops. They had spent months fortifying every inch of the island, 500 defensive positions. Pillboxes made of steel-reinforced concrete, covered with coconut logs and sand, machine gun nests, firing positions connected by trenches and tunnels, artillery bunkers, command posts buried so deep that battleship shells couldn't reach them. The Japanese commander, Admiral Keiji Shibasaki, was reportedly so confident in his defenses that he boasted, "1 million men cannot take Tarawa in 100 years." On November the 20th, 1943, 18,000 U.S. Marines hit the beaches. What followed was 76 hours of horror. The preliminary naval bombardment, hours of shelling from battleships and cruisers, looked devastating. The island disappeared under smoke and explosions. Surely nothing could survive that. But when the Marines waded ashore, the Japanese positions opened fire. Machine guns, artillery, mortars. Interlocking fields of fire that turned the coral reef and beaches into kill zones. Marines died in the water, died on the beaches, died trying to advance inland. The carefully planned assault dissolved into chaos. And when the Marines finally reached the Japanese positions, they discovered the real problem. They had no effective way to destroy them. Rifles couldn't penetrate the concrete. Grenades thrown into firing slits were ineffective. The Japanese would throw them back, or they'd explode harmlessly in the bunker's entrance. Explosive charges had to be placed directly on the bunker, which meant getting close enough to be shot. The only reliable method was to get a demolition team close enough to use satchel charges or flamethrowers. But that meant exposing yourself completely. It meant almost certain death for the attacking Marines. Every bunker became a separate battle, a separate nightmare. The Marines won. 3 days of savage fighting. By November the 23rd, the island was secured. Of the 5,000 Japanese defenders, only 17 survived to be captured, wounded men who couldn't kill themselves. The rest died fighting or committed suicide. American casualties? Over 3,000. More than 1,000 dead in 76 hours for an island 2 miles long. The lesson was terrifying. This was how the Japanese intended to defend every island between here and Tokyo. Every beach, every hill, every cave. Turn it into a fortress and fight to the last man. The arithmetic was unsustainable. If Tarawa cost 3,000 casualties, what would Saipan cost? Iwo Jima? Okinawa? What would invading the Japanese home islands cost if every city, every town, every house became a miniature Tarawa? The Marines needed a new weapon. Not just a stronger one, a scarier one. Something that could break the Japanese defensive system without requiring Marine infantry to die taking every bunker by hand. The answer was fire. Fire as a weapon is ancient. But modern flamethrowers, devices that project ignited liquid fuel, were a World War I innovation. By World War II, most armies had infantry flamethrowers. The United States had the M1 and M2 models. Portable flamethrowers carried by infantry. In theory, they were the perfect weapon for bunker warfare. Fire could reach into spaces where grenades couldn't. It consumed oxygen. It created psychological terror far beyond its physical destructiveness. Japanese troops, trapped in a confined bunker with fire, would panic, flee, die. In practice, the infantry flamethrower was a death sentence for the operator. Here's why. The weight. The M1/M2 flamethrower system weighed about 70 pounds fully loaded. 40 pounds of napalm fuel, 30 pounds of equipment, tanks, hoses, ignition system, protective gear. The operator carried this on his back while trying to navigate coral reefs, jungle terrain, or volcanic rock under fire. The effective range, 20 to 30 yards, maybe 40 yards in ideal conditions. That meant the operator had to get within 30 yards of a Japanese bunker to engage it, well within range of machine guns, rifles, and grenades. The duration burn time, 8 to 10 seconds of continuous fire. Then the fuel tank was empty. You had one shot at each target. If you missed, you were carrying 70 pounds of useless, flammable equipment in combat. The visibility. The moment a flamethrower operator stood up to engage a target, he became the single most obvious target on the battlefield. A man with a massive tank on his back, shooting a stream of fire. Every Japanese soldier would focus on him immediately. Japanese soldiers quickly learned to prioritize flamethrower operators. Snipers would wait for them. Machine gunners would focus on them. They became kill-on-sight priority targets. Despite these horrific disadvantages, the infantry flamethrower worked. When it reached a bunker and fired, the effect was devastating. Napalm, thickened gasoline, jellied with additives, would splash into the bunker, stick to walls and equipment and people, and burn at over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. It consumed oxygen, created choking smoke, turned the bunker into an oven. Japanese troops inside would die from burns, from asphyxiation, from heat shock. Those who could would flee the bunker, often on fire, sometimes to be shot down by Marines waiting outside. The psychological impact was total. Flamethrowers broke morale in ways that bullets and explosives never did. But the cost was too high. Flamethrower operators had casualty rates far above infantry average. They were heroes, posthumous heroes. Units couldn't sustain those losses. The Marines needed a way to deliver fire to Japanese bunkers without sacrificing their best men. They needed armor. The solution came from multiple sources converging on the same idea. The Seabees, naval construction battalions, who built everything from airfields to fortifications and weren't afraid to improvise. Marine Corps officers who'd seen the flamethrower's potential and its limitations. And the Chemical Warfare Service, CWS, the U.S. Army organization responsible for flame weapons, smoke, and chemical agents. The idea was simple, brutal, and brilliant. Put the flamethrower inside a tank. Tanks had armor. Tanks were immune to small arms fire. Tanks could get close to bunkers without the crew dying. If you could mount a flamethrower on a tank, you'd have all the psychological and tactical advantages of fire with none of the vulnerability. The first attempts were made in the field. During the Mariana Islands campaign in 1944, Marines took M3 Stuart light tanks, small, fast, lightly armored, and improvised flamethrower installations. The CWS provided the flamethrower components. The Seabees did the modifications. They created something called the Satan. It worked. At Saipan and Tinian, these improvised flamethrower tanks proved devastatingly effective against Japanese bunkers. They could drive right up to fortified positions, shrug off machine gun fire, and incinerate the defenders. But the Stuart had problems. It was lightly armored, only 1 to 2 inches of steel plate. Japanese anti-tank weapons, 47mm guns, magnetic mines, close assault satchel charges could still knock it out, and the fuel capacity was limited. What the Marines needed was something more survivable, more intimidating, more capable. They needed the Sherman. The M4 Sherman medium tank was the workhorse of the American Armored Forces. 30 tons, up to 3 inches of frontal armor. Reliable, mass-produced, available in large numbers. The Chemical Warfare Service developed a specialized variant, the POA-CW-SH-1 flamethrower tank. POA stood for Pacific Ocean Areas. CWS for Chemical Warfare Service. H1 indicated it was mounted in the hull. The conversion was elegant in its simplicity. Remove the bow machine gun and its operator's position. Install the flamethrower gun in that location. Replace the ammunition storage with fuel tanks. Retain the Sherman's 75mm main gun and turret-mounted machine gun for self-defense and conventional fire support. Let me give you the technical specifications because they're what made this weapon so terrifying. Range, 100 to 150 yards, not 30 yards like the infantry model. 100 yards. That's the length of a football field. The tank could sit at what seemed like a safe distance and still incinerate a bunker. Fuel, 290 gallons of napalm, not gasoline. Napalm, thickened, jellied gasoline that stuck to everything it touched and burned at temperatures that melted steel. Duration, 60 seconds of continuous fire, or 61-second bursts. That's 6 times longer than an infantry flamethrower. Enough to engage multiple targets on a single fuel load. Armor. All of this firepower was protected by 30 tons of steel armor. Japanese machine guns couldn't penetrate it. Small anti-tank guns often couldn't penetrate it. The crew was safe. Crew, 5 men. Driver, assistant driver, bow gunner, who operated the flamethrower. Tank commander, gunner, and loader for the 75mm gun. All protected inside the hull. The Marines nicknamed it the Zippo after the popular cigarette lighter. Lights every time. It was an innocuous name that completely understated the industrial horror this vehicle represented. By early 1945, these tanks were being produced and shipped to the Pacific in numbers. They arrived just in time for the bloodiest battles of the war. The Zippo was never used alone. American armor doctrine emphasized combined arms, tanks working together with different capabilities. The tactic developed for assaulting Japanese fortifications was called Corkscrew and Blowtorch. 2 tanks would work in tandem. The Corkscrew, a standard Sherman with its 75mm gun and machine guns. This tank would engage the bunker with high explosive shells and machine gun fire. Not necessarily to destroy it. Japanese bunkers were often too tough for even 75mm shells to penetrate, but to suppress it, to force the defenders to take cover, to keep their heads down. While the defenders were suppressed, the Blowtorch, the Zippo flamethrower tank, would maneuver forward. It would position itself at optimal range, usually 50 to 100 yards from the target. Then it would aim its flamethrower nozzle at the bunker's firing slit, the embrasure, and open fire. What happened next was beyond anything the Japanese had experienced or prepared for. Imagine you are a Japanese soldier. You're in a reinforced concrete bunker on Iwo Jima or Okinawa. You've been trained that this position is your fortress, your tomb, perhaps, but a fortress nonetheless. You've sworn to fight to the death. Surrender is not an option. Your honor, your family's honor, the emperor's honor, all depend on you holding this position until you die. You hear the battle outside. Artillery, small arms fire, the ping, ping, ping of bullets ricocheting off your bunker's concrete walls. You're safe. The Americans can't reach you in here. Then a new sound, heavier, the grinding of treads. A tank is approaching. You have a Type 97 20mm anti-tank rifle, or maybe a 47mm anti-tank gun. You've been trained to use it. You aim through the firing slit and fire. The shell hits the American tank. You see the impact. It should penetrate, should kill the crew, should stop the advance. But it doesn't. The shell bounces off or penetrates the armor but fails to disable the tank. The Sherman keeps coming. It stops, maybe 100 yards away, too far for you to effectively engage with anything but the anti-tank gun. You fire again. Another hit, another failure to penetrate. And then the world ends. A stream of fire, thick as a tree trunk, impossibly bright, terrifyingly fast, shoots from the tank directly at your bunker. The napalm doesn't explode like a shell. It splashes. It hits the firing slit, the narrow embrasure you've been shooting from, and some of it goes through, but much of it splashes against the concrete around the opening. It sticks, burns, creates a curtain of fire that blocks the entrance. The napalm that gets inside the bunker hits the back wall, and because it's liquid, jellied liquid, it doesn't just stay there. It splashes, bounces, sprays throughout the interior space. It coats the walls, drips from the ceiling, pools on the floor. Everything in the bunker becomes fuel. Your equipment catches fire. Your ammunition catches fire. Your comrades catch fire. The temperature inside the bunker, in a matter of seconds, reaches 1,800 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But burning to death is not the worst part. The worst part is what happens to the air. Fire consumes oxygen. A napalm fire in a confined space consumes it incredibly fast. The oxygen level inside the bunker drops from 21% to near zero in seconds. You can't breathe. You're not just burning, you're suffocating. The pressure inside the bunker changes. The fire creates a backdraft. Smoke and superheated air blast back out through the firing slit. Anyone standing near the entrance is hit with a wave of heat that can kill even without direct flame contact. Some Japanese soldiers died from burns, some from asphyxiation, some from heat shock. Their organs simply shut down from exposure to temperatures no human body can withstand. Some, in the deeper caves and tunnel complexes, tried to retreat further into the fortifications, but the smoke followed them, the heat followed them. They died in the darkness, underground, unable to escape. This was the shock the title refers to. The moment when Japanese soldiers, trained, disciplined, committed to fighting to the death, realized they had no defense against this weapon. You couldn't shoot the tank. Your weapons couldn't penetrate its armor. You couldn't hide from the fire. It reached into your bunker, your tunnel, your cave. You couldn't outbrave it. Bushido meant nothing. Spirit meant nothing. Courage meant nothing. This was physics and chemistry. Industrial-scale incineration. Your options were burn to death in your position or flee the bunker, likely on fire, and be shot down by waiting Marines. Neither was survival. Both were just different ways to die. On Iwo Jima, February to March 1945, 8 Zippo tanks were assigned to the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions. They were in constant use. Every major Japanese strongpoint, the pillboxes at the airfields, the fortified caves on Mount Suribachi, the tunnel networks in the center of the island, was attacked with flamethrower tanks. On Okinawa, April to June 1945, the battle for the Shuri Line, a complex of fortified positions defending the southern part of the island, relied heavily on Zippos. The Japanese had turned every cave, every tomb, every natural formation into a fortress. Conventional weapons made slow, costly progress. The flamethrower tanks broke the stalemate. Sugarloaf Hill, a seemingly insignificant 50-foot rise that cost the Marines over 2,000 casualties to capture, fell only after concentrated flamethrower tank attacks burned out the interconnected defensive positions. The Zippo became the primary weapon for fortress reduction, the only weapon that consistently worked against the deep, heavily fortified positions the Japanese had prepared. The flamethrower tank was a horrific weapon. Even by the brutal standards of World War II combat, it stood out as particularly terrible. It caused death by burning and suffocation. It created terror far beyond its actual destructive capacity. It was, by any reasonable moral standard, an atrocity in the making. And to the Marines who fought in the Pacific, it was a lifesaver. General Holland, Howlin' Mad Smith, who commanded Marine forces in the Central Pacific, said, "The flamethrower tank was the most effective weapon we had for dealing with Japanese fortifications. It saved thousands of American lives." That's not hyperbole, that's cold arithmetic. The ugly calculus worked like this. Option A, send infantry to assault a fortified bunker. They'll take casualties approaching it. They'll take casualties trying to get close enough to use demolition charges or infantry flamethrowers. If they succeed, they'll lose men. If they fail, they'll lose more men trying again. Option B, send a Zippo tank. It drives up to the bunker, largely immune to defensive fire. It incinerates the position in minutes. The crew is safe inside the armor. No Marine infantry casualties. The choice was easy. Obvious. Not even a moral dilemma from the American perspective. One Zippo tank could do in 3 minutes what would have taken 2 platoons of Marines 6 hours and cost dozens of casualties. War is about resource allocation, about achieving objectives at minimum cost. The flamethrower tank was resource efficient. It traded napalm and mechanical wear for human lives. For American commanders, that was an acceptable trade. The Zippo broke the Japanese defensive model. The entire Japanese strategy for defending the Pacific Islands and, critically, for defending the home islands if invasion came, was based on a simple assumption. Every defensive position would cost the Americans so much blood to capture that eventually the American people would lose the will to continue. They'd negotiate. They'd accept a peace that left Japan with some of its conquests intact. This strategy required fortifications to be effective, required bunkers to withstand assault, required the defenders' willingness to die to translate into American casualties. The flamethrower tank made that assumption invalid. A Japanese bunker, no matter how well built, how well defended, how bravely held, could be neutralized in minutes by a single Zippo tank without significant American casualties. The bunker was no longer a fortress. It was a tomb, an oven, a death trap for its defenders. The Japanese soldiers facing Zippos were shocked because their courage didn't matter, their training didn't matter, their willingness to die for the emperor didn't matter. They were being exterminated by a machine they couldn't stop. The sleeping giant that Admiral Yamamoto had warned about wasn't just building ships faster than Japan could sink them. It was building nightmares and putting them on tank treads. The flamethrower tank is rarely discussed in popular histories of World War II. It's overshadowed by naval battles, by the atomic bombs, by the larger strategic narrative. But to the men who fought on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, both American and Japanese, the Zippo was the defining weapon of those battles. The Americans feared the islands, but trusted the Zippos. The Japanese feared the Zippos more than anything else they faced. In the calculus of total war, the flamethrower tank was a moral horror that saved lives by making resistance pointless. It was a weapon so terrible that it convinced Japanese soldiers, trained to never surrender, that their defensive positions were death traps rather than fortresses. And that, more than any other single factor, broke the back of Japan's island defense strategy and shortened the Pacific War.